Thanks, Karen Corda. The Taoiseach is clearly very touchy on the subject of his government's lack of care for renters. And the reason for that is we have a government of landlords for the landlords. I give some facts rather than assertions. The cost of renting has more than doubled in the last 10 years. Dublin has the 5th highest rents in all of Europe, more expensive than Paris, Berlin or Rome. Irish renters pay an average of 40% of their income in rent, the highest in the world. There's a crisis facing renters in this country, and the government always said, and you hear an echo of it again from the Taoiseach today, they couldn't introduce an eviction ban, they couldn't introduce a rent freeze, they couldn't introduce proper rent controls that would bring rents down to affordable levels. Why? Constitution says no. When COVID hit and they were under massive pressure, they found a way. But now COVID is receding, it's back to normal business for the government and the landlords that they represent. The eviction ban is being lifted and the rent freeze will be gone with it. But it's not enough for the corporate landlords to return to their normal increases of 4% a year, which is what the government's rent controls meant in effect. They want to make up for the 4% that they missed out on last year. They want a double rent hike, 2 years of rent increases in the 1 year. From the 13th of July, as things stand, literally hundreds of thousands of renters are facing rent increases of up to 8%. Jane, who lives in a very ordinary house in Tala, has been told that her rent is going up €160 a month, an 8% increase to €2,140. Philip lives in an apartment in Island Bridge. His landlord is increasing the rent by €107 a month, a 7.7% increase. Samantha in Dunleary is facing a 10% increase. Her rent is going up €166 to €17.80 a month because the last time her rent was increased was January 2019. Many of these people are the same people who are facing cuts to their pandemic unemployment payment. How are they meant to find this extra money for to pay the landlords? When I raised this with the Taoiseach last week, he said, "I must admit to not being aware of it. I did not envisage that people would be able to apply a retrospective year." When I asked the Taoiseach about it yesterday, he said, and he says it again today, the Minister is examining the situation. It speaks to the government being entirely out of touch with renters that they did not know that this was coming. Do you not know any renters, Taoiseach? Does the Taoiseach not know any renters? Now the government says we're going to deal with it, but Philip, Jane, Samantha, they want assurances, and they want them today, that the government will prevent these double rent increases happening in July, but also that they will prevent these double rent increases, and the door was open to it by what the Taoiseach just said, happening in August or September or October.
Time is up.
And they also want actually proper rent controls to be brought into place to bring rents down to affordable levels.
Thank you very much, Deputy Murphy. Taoiseach.
Yeah, look, as I've said earlier, the Residential Tenancies and Valuation Act of 2020 provided that rent increases were not permitted to take place during an emergency period from August 2020 to the 10th of January 2021 for tenants with rent arrears due to COVID-19 and at risk of losing their tenancy who make the necessary declaration. So the government legislatively provided to protect tenants during the emergency period, and clearly the capacity of government legally to have a blanket freeze on rents outside of the emergency period is limited, and it's by the Constitution. Those are the facts. That said, the legislation that came in that allowed for the 4% increase, the Minister is going to amend. And he's going to amend with a view to security of tenure, but also with a view to the rate. And he's going to bring in legislation quickly to deal with the 8% in relation to those who are most vulnerable and those most at risk, and will respond in that manner. But again, government doesn't represent landlords. I certainly don't represent landlords, and I have no interest in so doing, but I do believe in supply. I do believe that we need an adequacy of supply. I have seen nothing from you, Deputy, that in any way contributes to the supply issue. And I think that is a key point in terms of improving the overall housing situation. We did about 20,000 houses last year. Admittedly, COVID-19 impacted on construction. We need more affordable housing at affordable rents. We need more cost rental, which the Minister is providing for this year for the first time ever, the first national cost rental scheme. We're providing both through state-built affordable housing, new schemes for people to afford to buy housing, where they're paying rents at the moment that would exceed a mortgage, for example. And I know that. I know many renters, by the way, many renters, and I want to change the current situation. I don't think the current situation is acceptable. And we're setting about changing that. As we come out of the first global pandemic in 100 years, we're going to focus 100% on this housing issue. And that is a clear objective of government. And we have sought during COVID-19 to protect renters from both eviction and both from excessive rent increases right throughout, and we brought in legislation to protect renters in that regard. And the earlier legislation that you referred to, which allowed for the 4% per annum in the rent pressure zones, that is the law right now. And the Minister is committed to changing that law. And I fully accept that rents are too high for many, many people. But I think equally, what's important is that we give people opportunities to buy houses, and we give people opportunities to access more social houses. And that's why we've the largest social housing programme now in place.
Thank you very much,
for the next 5 years.
We're out of time. Thank you. Deputy Murphy.
Thank you. It's another example of the Constitution says no argumentation of the government. The Taoiseach says we can't have a blanket freeze on rents because of the Constitution, and he says those are the facts. I don't believe that those are the facts. I think the government is hiding behind that argument precisely because they represent developers. But let's concede that those are the facts. Okay, let's accept the idea that the protection of private property in the Constitution means that there are limits within which we can't go beyond in terms of rent controls, eviction freezes, and so on. Okay, we concede that. Well then, Taoiseach, can I take it that you're going to support the Right to Housing Bill, which is being read at second stage tomorrow from People Before Profit? A bill which will introduce a right to housing into the Constitution, a right to secure, affordable, dignified housing appropriate to need, and which shall accordingly delimit the right to private property where it's necessary to ensure the common good. To remove this excuse, and to therefore say we absolutely can do rent controls, we absolutely can have rent freezes, we absolutely can have a ban on evictions. Will you be supporting the Right to Housing Bill, as the Green Party, for example, did in 2017? Because we'll be running a major campaign on this, and you won't be able to have it both ways. Where you say we'd love to do it, but we can't do it because of the Constitution. Well, then support our constitutional change so that we can do it.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach.
First of all, your legislation is been allowed to go to committee stage, but the government is bringing forward and will bring forward an approach to insertion of a right to housing in the Constitution. It may be different to the construct that you've suggested, but government parties are committed to a right to housing in the Constitution, and will set about preparing for that in a proper, comprehensive and constructive way. But that in itself isn't going to solve the immediate issues, or indeed the issues of the next while in terms of building more houses. And that's why I said earlier, and I really mean it, there are too many people objecting on councils across the country to too many housing projects. And I think if we all accept that this is a crisis, and it is a crisis in terms of housing, both for renters, both for people who can't get housing, be it social housing, or who can't, there's not enough affordable housing for people to buy, it's a crisis. And if we all accept that, then we all need to act accordingly as well. And we don't have the luxury of opposing housing schemes that could provide 1,200 houses in a given area, or 500 houses in another area, because it doesn't fit your particular ideological sort of approach.
Thank you.
We do need a bit of collective consensus approach to getting projects built, because until we get more houses built, we are not going to solve this problem.
Thank you, Taoiseach.